Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In the small town of Fairview, everything seemed calm. A living postcard. The streets were lined with perfectly trimmed trees, the lawns were meticulously mowed, and the mailboxes were hand-painted. Neighbors greeted each other with a nod, sometimes a slightly forced hello, but always with a smile. On Sundays, the church was full, and on Saturdays, the high school football games brought the entire community together like an unchanging ritual. The Lincoln High School, with its red bricks and flags fluttering in the wind, represented local pride. The teachers were rigorous, the students well supervised, and the school statistics served as a showcase for the city's excellence. But beneath this perfect surface hid another reality. A fragile balance maintained by silence, hypocrisy, and the power of a few influential families. A seeming peace, but a false one. And at the heart of this illusion was a shadow from elsewhere. A name no one dared to speak aloud. A whispered name, erased from conversations like a secret too heavy, Don Alexander Moretti. Don Moretti wasn't just a man you crossed paths with. He was a living legend in the criminal underworld, a figure as invisible as he was omnipresent. He ruled with an iron fist a sprawling empire based in New York, extending from the casinos of Atlantic City, the docks of Boston, the art galleries of Miami, and the private clubs of Chicago. His face never appeared in the newspapers, but his influence dictated decisions at the highest political levels. It was said of him that he disliked needless bloodshed, but that he knew how to make a man disappear without leaving a trace. And it was to this peaceful city, far from the dark streets of Brooklyn or the gilded salons of Manhattan, that Don Moretti had chosen to send his only son, Elliot. He wasn't there to conquer, nor to police. He was there, to survive. A hasty move, imposed by a war between rival families. Far from the bullets, the betrayals, the heavy silences around marble tables. Fairview, for Don Moretti, represented a bubble of normality for his heir, a desperate attempt to offer him a somewhat normal adolescence. Elliot Moretti was 15 years old, but his gaze belonged to someone older. Much older. His gray eyes, piercing, cold, almost metallic, seemed to weigh every detail around him. His black hair, perfectly combed every morning, left nothing to chance. His clothes, always sober but elegant, bore stitching that no ordinary teenager would have noticed. He walked straight, hands in his pockets, with the rigor of an officer. And above all, he spoke little, only when necessary, always with precise words. Never one more. At Lincoln High School, he was the new one. And at Fairview, that automatically meant the stranger. For the first few days, he went unnoticed. Sitting at the back of the class, notebook open, gaze attentive, he answered accurately but without enthusiasm. In the cafeteria, he ate alone, slowly, setting down his cutlery with almost ritualistic precision. No one knew his story. He said little about himself, except that he came from the East, and that his father was in business. But his silence, his impeccable appearance, and above all his absence of visible emotion soon aroused suspicion and annoyance. It didn't take much more to attract the attention of the Corridor C tyrants. Jason Miller, 17, football star, had everything a teenager could want in this town: popularity, power, and an impunity inherited from his father, the sheriff of Fairview. Jason ruled the halls like an immature but feared little king. At his side, Tyler Brooks, thin and mocking, served as second, mocking, sneering, following like a shadow. And then there was Brent Holloway, the most brutal, the one who only smiled when he hit. The trio terrorized the weakest, the loners, the overly eccentric. And Elliot, despite his elegant posture, ticked all the boxes: new, silent, foreign, and above all, elusive. From the first week, Jason spotted him in the main hall. Elliot leaned against a wall, reading a black-covered book, while the other students laughed, shouted, or pushed each other. Jason frowned. Who is this guy? Does he think he's too good for us or what? Tyler writ. Look at this suit, what's a little prince? Brent simply grunted. I don't like him. Jason approached him, confident as always. "Hey. You. New guy. Can you read or do you just want to be taught the rules around here?" Elliot looked up. He stared at him. Straight. Calm. And he answered softly. "Rules? I grew up in a place where they didn't exist. Silence. No fear. No submission." Jason took a step back, just for a moment. Then he laughed. "You've got guts. We'll see if it lasts." And the game began. One day, at the Lincoln High School cafeteria, as the smell of frying and the laughter of teenagers filled the air, Elliot sat down at his usual table, alone, as always. He calmly unwrapped the lunch Marcelo had prepared, a sandwich carefully cut in half, a shiny apple, and a small bottle of still water. Everything was perfectly arranged on his tray, like a silent ritual. He didn't listen to others. Not really. But Hecna always watching him. Whispering. Approaching. And that day, he smelled the acrid odor of arrogance before he even looked up. Jason Miller had advanced, with heavy steps and a mocking smile, accompanied by Tyler and Brent, both amused at the thought of what was to come next. Jason planted his hands on the table, leaned towards Elliot, and said in a voice loud enough to attract attention. "So, new guy, have you lost your tongue or are you just too snobby to talk to real guys?" A heavy silence fell. Several students turned their heads, attentive, as if they sensed a performance was about to begin. Elliot didn't look up immediately. He finished chewing. Slowly. Delicately. Then he raised his head, met Jason's gaze, without the slightest fear, and answered, silently. A fixed gaze. Cold. Deep. Too calm. What the fuck that, the trigger. Jason didn't like that look. There was something about it he didn't understand. Something that didn't belong in Fairview. A look without provocation, but without submission either. A look, dangerous. Then, in a childish but brutal gesture of dominance, Jason overturned the tray with a sweep of his arm. The cutlery slid to the floor, the bottle rolled under the table, and the sandwich fell apart like a symbol of contempt. "Now you can start again. With good manners." Elliot looked down at the ground. Not a word. Not a frown. He just calmly picked up his apple. The only thing that remained intact. He put it on the table, wiped it with the end of his sleeve, and took a bite. Jason turned livid. This was the beginning. In the following days, the violence became more direct. In the corridors, Jason and his pack kept pushing him. Elliot got up without saying a word. In the toilet, they threw a bucket of water at him, laughing, shouting. "So, the prince needs his royal bath?" He came home soaked. He said nothing. Then came the insults, the mockery of his name, his overly ironed clothes, his psychopathic look, his neutral accent that betrayed no origins. One day, they ripped off one of his shirts in the locker room. Another, they threw his shoes down the toilet. And the worst was this public humiliation, one Thursday afternoon. In the sports changing rooms, Jason ordered Elliot to strip in front of the others. They almost ripped his shirt off, pushing him against a locker while laughing. Elliot obeyed. Slowly. He took off his clothes without resistance. Without anger. Amid laughter, whistles, and raised phones. But in his eyes, there was nothing. No rage. No shame, just icy patience. And Brent noticed this. He later whispered to Jason. "There's something weird about him. He takes too much. It's not normal." But Jason, blinded by his need for domination, shrugged. "He's just a psycho. We need to break him for good." Every evening Elliot was coming home in the villa he shared with Marcelo, an old man with white hair and a straight build like an old soldier. Marcelo prepared dinner, served a hot dish, and then watched. He saw the bruises. He saw the torn shirt, the split lip, the changed shoes. But he didn't ask questions. He waited. One evening, as Elliot was setting down his bag near the entrance and taking off his leather gloves, he stopped. He stood silently for a moment, standing in the middle of the living room. Then he turned his head toward Marcelo. They don't know who they're messing with. Marcelo looked at him gravely. He didn't need to ask who. He knew. He had seen the same calm once, in his father's eyes. He slipped into the office. Opened a chest. Took out a satellite phone, black, protected, connected to a single line. He dialed the number. A tone. Then a deep voice, in Italian. Ready? Marcelo answered slowly, as if starting a machine that he had hoped would never restart. It's time. Hundreds of kilometers away, in Appenhaus de Manhattan, Don Alexander Moretti slowly closed a leather-bound book. He raised his glasses to his lips, placed them on the black marble table, and looked out the gleaming bay window at the city that never slept. He didn't ask anything. He didn't say Elliot's name. He knew. He simply whispered, in a voice so calm it froze the blood. No one touches the Moretti blood. He picked up his own phone. Prepare a team. Let them remain invisible. There must be no blood, only lessons. And let them know they have met the devil's gaze without recognizing it. At dawn on Monday morning, the soft sunlight bathed the Miller's home in a seeming tranquility. Jason's father, Sheriff Harold Miller, came downstairs as he did every day to make coffee, while his wife opened the living room blinds. When they went outside to take Jason to football practice, something derailed their perfect routine. All 4 tires of their black SUV were cleanly sliced. Not deflated. Not punctured, sliced, as if with a surgical blade, without a sound, without a trace of footprints in the morning dew. The sheriff grimaced, his instinct telling him that this was not a simple act of vandalism. Kids. He muttered, not really believing it. But that was not what made him tremble. Jason remained planted on the steps, motionless. His mother, while collecting the mail, had found a black envelope, nameless. She opened it, thinking it was a tasteless advertisement. But what she pulled out made her let out a quiet, muffled scream. It was a photo, taken from outside, through the living room bay window. It showed Jason lying on the couch, his mother reading a book, his father dozing in the armchair. All the curtains were closed. No flashes. A photo taken the day before. From the inside. Jason felt his blood run cold. He recognized the frame. The cushion behind his head. The light from the street lamp. Someone was entered their home. Someone had been watching them, without them realizing it. He said nothing. He put the photo back in his bag, without a word. He didn't tell anyone about it. Tuesday. What the fuck? Tyler Brooks, who lost his smile. It all started at 10:02 a.m., when an unmarked black car pulled up in front of the insurance agency run by his father, Richard Brooks, a respected Fairview notable. 4 IRS agents descended, accompanied by 2 FBI investigators. They entered the building with federal warrants. Search. Arrest. Freezing of accounts. Tyler, urgently summoned to the office, saw his father handcuffed as he left his own office. He screamed at the injustice, but the officers brought out a complete file, several years of accounting falsifications, false invoices, and disguised money laundering. The most surprising thing? The file had been submitted anonymously. The attached documents were perfect, dated, signed, accompanied by copies of confidential emails that only a high-level employee could have obtained. Within 24 hours, the Brooks family savings account was blocked. The luxury car was seized. The office was closed. And Tyler, for the first time in his life, did not go to high school the next day. He didn't say a word. He didn't even dare send Jason a message. Wednesday. What the fuck? Brent Holloway. Unlike the other two, Brent lived on a farm outside Fairview. Isolated. Loud. Brutal. He'd always thought he was untouchable. The kind of boy who bragged he could beat anyone, anytime. But that day, when he came home from school, he discovered abnormal silence around the house. No barking. No footsteps. He called his dog. Diesel. Come here, big guy. Nothing. He walked around the field. And suddenly, his heart froze. There, hanging on an old oak, at the edge of the property. Diesel, his faithful German shepherd, was hanging by the throat o' a rope. Brent screamed. He ran, tried to unhook him, to revive him. In vain. Then he saw the trunk of the tree just below the knot, carved with a knife into the dark bark, a sentence. You don't humiliate a prince. The letters were clear. Not another word. No signature. Brent backed away slowly. He looked around, searching for a figure, a face, a clue. But there was nothing. Nothing but a cold wind, a swinging rope, and that message, more chilling than any blow. He fell to his knees. He too said nothing, but he never returned to the locker room again. On Thursday morning, a heavy silence had fallen in the school corridors. The three bullies no longer dared to meet Elliot's gaze. Their former confidence had waned, replaced by a palpable nervousness. They walked at a distance, deliberately avoiding Corridor C, as if this simple gesture could protect them from an invisible threat. They no longer spoke in groups, preferring scattered whispers, casting furtive glances behind them. Fear, that implacable teacher, had taken refuge in their chests. But Elliot wasn't satisfied. Fear wasn't enough. He wanted more. He wanted each of them to understand, deep down, that he wasn't easy prey, that he was forged in a fire that nothing could extinguish. That Thursday night, he stood in the shadows of the locker room, his heart beating with a strange determination. He knew they would come, one by one. He waited patiently. The gym was silent, the dim light casting long shadows on the cold walls. Finally, the door creaked softly, opened, and the first bully stepped forward, alone, looking hesitant. Elliot closed the door behind him with a sharp click, locking the room. The tension rose a notch. The second entered, then the third. All three of them, trapped, their pale faces betraying the panic that was beginning to grip them. You wanted to break me, Elliot began, his voice low but firm, each word carrying a hammer blow. You thought I was vulnerable, a weakling to be crushed. But you forgot one crucial thing, I was born in fire. A heavy silence followed, laden with latent menace. You have no idea what fear really means. Jason, the boldest, tried to stammer out a reply, but the words died in his throat. Elliot approached slowly, calm, in control of the situation. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a metal object, which he turned between his fingers. A massive ring, engraved with a stylized M, the ancestral symbol of the Moretti clan. My father, he said, holding up the ring to their wide eyes, directs what your families watch in the newspapers with horror. You wanted to attack the son of a ghost. The room seemed to close in around them. Elliot didn't raise his voice, but his words echoed like an implacable verdict. Now. His voice became lower, colder, you are marked. He didn't hit them. He didn't need to. His gaze, hard as a blade, cut a furrow of fear far deeper than any blow. He was the embodiment of cold, certain vengeance. Then, without another word, Elliot turned away, opened the door, and walked out, leaving them frozen, paralyzed, prisoners of their own terror. Their bodies trembled, their thoughts raced. They knew something had changed that night. That they were no longer predators, but prey to a very real ghost. Jason, Tyler, and Brent left Lincoln High School a few weeks later, each carrying with them the invisible traces of that confrontation. Like shadows fleeing the light, they disappeared one by one, as if erased from the school landscape. Jason was enrolled in a religious boarding school far from the city, an austere place where discipline and prayer were supposed to repair what his behavior had broken. But no one ever knew if peace had truly won a place in his tormented mind. Tyler, meanwhile, officially moved to an aunt's, a vague excuse thrown together, a fresh start in an unfamiliar neighborhood. His old schoolmates never saw any other members of his family in Lincoln, and rumors began to swirl that he had run away, fleeing both his mistakes and the fear that now inhabited him. Brent, the most fragile of the three, was seen for several months at a psychologist's office, every day, behind the closed doors of an office where he tried in vain to soothe a deep unease. The sessions were not enough to erase the shame, the terror, and the weight of a secret he could not share. Meanwhile, Elliot continued on his way, unperturbed. A brilliant, solitary, and feared student, he moved through the halls of the school like a silent, mysterious, almost untouchable shadow. It was said that he belonged to a family of unsuspecting wealth, that his name alone made powerful people tremble. Others told even more fantastic stories, that he was protected by the CIA, or even that dark forces watched over him. But the truth, the real one, remained hidden behind his cold, impenetrable gaze. No one knew his story. No one knew where he came from or how far he could go. And above all, no one ever dared to ask him the slightest question again. This silence had become his fortress. He didn't seek popularity or recognition. His presence alone was enough to command respect and fear. Those who dared to challenge him paid a high price, not only with their reputation, but with their inner peace. In the hallways, in the classrooms, in the shadows of Lincoln High School, Elliot's name now circulated like an urban legend, a silent warning: some ghosts never die. They wait. And when they strike, no one emerges unscathed.